people have been asking me to comment on this incel thing. I kind of go back and forth on that, or let me say I understand it from different perspectives. Of course, this has to be framed in the notion, the sort of strongly held understanding that nothing excuses killing people randomly in the streets because you're pissed off at life. That's not the way to deal with things. But I understand the rage. I understand where it comes from. I understand how painful it can be to be isolated. And I think, for those of you who don't know, incel refers to involuntary celibate. And it's sort of a moniker that's being applied to particularly young men who are unable to connect with women, and they express this rage by killing people, like this guy did recently in Toronto, and there was a guy in Santa Barbara who did it a few years ago. And so it's become one of these online shadowy movements of young men who are sort of vicious and angry about the way the world is treating them. And look, I understand it. When I was in my 20s, I went for long stretches with no women in my life, and they sure seemed long. In my case, it was primarily because I was traveling, and I've never been a guy who just sort of meets a woman and she wants to sleep with me because of how great looking I am. That's never been my thing. So, the way I connected with women involved being in a place for a while and getting to know people, and having a chance to have conversations. Like I've never met a woman in a dance club or something and gone home with her. It just doesn't happen because I can't. There's no way to have a conversation. So there are lots of guys better looking than me, so she's going to pick one of them if it's all visual. And my point is, I know I have an understanding of how painful that can be. Even if in my case, I could tell myself it was my own choice and it was a decision I was making, still, it fucking sucks. I think the mistake we make as men is in thinking that the pain is about sex. And it isn't. It's, getting laid doesn't solve the problem, because the problem is a lack of intimacy and contact and touch and having someone who knows you and loves you in your life. And it's very easy to think that that's about sex, but it isn't. Sex is just sort of a symbol of it and a biological correlate. But I think that what these people are really suffering over is the absence of love. And there are a lot of women who are suffering from this as well. There are a lot of old people suffering from it. There are more people who feel socially isolated now as a percentage of the population than ever in the existence of our species. We're very, very lonely. Johann Hari talks about that in Lost Connections. We are a deeply, fundamentally social species, and yet more of us are living our lives alone than ever before. And I know, you've got, 1,000 Facebook friends, but none of them rub your back when you're feeling sick or give you a foot massage while you're watching a movie. And that's what really matters. So I understand the rage, but if anyone's listening to me and feeling that rage and that helplessness, I would just encourage you to understand that it is not women's fault. it's not the fault of any individuals of I guess they call them normals or Chad and Nancy's or whatever I forget the names for people who are functional, and so they're very angry at those people, but it's not their fault. And the oldest mistake that we make is in attacking the wrong people, and we do that so much. The whole divide and conquer thing works so well on us. It certainly is not women's fault. Women are suffering just as much, but more quietly in most cases. They're not running around. Women's rage turns inward as depression, whereas men's rage tends to turn outward as violence. But it's still there. It still hurts the same. So I guess my take on it is just that I hope that young men will forgive themselves and certainly not blame women. And because the more anger you feel toward women, the more resentment you feel, the less likely it is that anyone's going to want to hang out with you and ultimately solve the problem that's at the root of all this. And one of the things that I hear that's an expression of that kind of disdain that is so ubiquitous and so people I know and respect, I hear them do this, referring to a woman as a number. Like, yeah, she's a 7, or even, like, oh, baby, you're a 9. Like, somebody's supposed to feel complimented that you're assigning a number, one number to a complex, nuanced human being. Guys, please don't do that. That's, any woman who hears you do that is going to lose respect for you. If it's a woman who has respect for herself. So I guess the way out of this mess is just to try to respect each other and forgive each other and ourselves, and recognize that the real problem is that we live in a pathological world. We live in a society that is not in alignment with our needs and our interests, and which is designed to make us unhappy, because the only way to get us to play the fucking game is to take away all the free happiness and then make us work so we can buy the fake fucking happiness. That's the way it all works. It's not your neighbor's fault. It's not your boss's fault. It's not your mother's fault. It's not your fault. But that's the way it is. We're fish in a poison river, and we're all trying to figure out how to swim to health and safety. The problem is we're in this poison river. So please don't blame the other fish.